right, strap in, everyone. This deep dive might get a little wild.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, we're tackling this book called La Conjuration antichrétienne.
The anti-Christian conspiracy, for those who don't speak French.
Right, and let me tell you, it gets pretty intense.
Early 20th century. This book, it's not your typical history lesson.
Not at all.
The author, Henri Delassus, he goes all in on a conspiracy theory.
Oh, yeah.
Claims there's been this, like, centuries-long plot to destroy Christianity, like wipe it out.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's not just, throwing out random events. He's like meticulously trying to connect all these dots. He sees this pattern in history, right? A grand narrative, like a big sweeping story connecting things like the Renaissance, the French Revolution, all leading up to, like the rise of modernism. And it's all connected, he says, by this secret thread, this underlying plot against the church.
So it's like he's looking back and he's like, wait a minute, there's a pattern here.
Exactly. He wants to, like, expose what he sees as this deliberate, coordinated campaign against the church that's been playing out over generations.
Wow. So at the heart of his argument, what's he saying? What's driving this whole thing?
Well, he describes it as this fundamental clash, like a battle between two opposing civilizations, like diametrically opposed.
Okay.
So on one side, you have like a world that's grounded in, those Christian principles.
Faith, tradition, the church as the ultimate authority.
Exactly. And then on the other side, you have a world that's rooted in, naturalism, humanism, all about reason, individual liberty, human progress,
Right. Would you say that's a fair way of putting it? Like, that's the central conflict he's laying out.
That's it. That's the core of his argument. And he believes this shift, this move away from a Christian-centric worldview, it started gaining momentum way back, like as early as the 13th century.
That early?
Yeah. He sees that as a turning point, a period when societal values and goals started to, like, drift away from the church's teachings, from their influence.
Interesting. Okay, so let's say there's a conspiracy, right?
Yeah.
Like you're saying. Who are the main players in this? Who's he pointing the finger at?
Well, he points fingers at some pretty major historical movements and institutions.
Like?
Well, he actually starts with the Renaissance.
Huh, the Renaissance. Most people think of that as a good thing.
Right, like a period of great art, intellectual flourishing, a rebirth after the Middle Ages.
Right.
But Delassus, he sees a darker side to it.
Really? What's so dark about Michelangelo's David,
Well, he argues that the Renaissance, it actually revived pagan ideals.
Okay.
It shifted the focus, away from eternal salvation and more towards, like, worldly pursuits.
Interesting.
He even cites things like, the Renaissance's embrace of human anatomy, like you see in their art and medical texts.
Right.
He sees that as a sign of them straying from spiritual concerns, like a glorification of the human form over the divine.
So he's saying, like, by focusing on the beauty of the human body, they were losing sight of, like, the beauty of God's creation.
That's exactly it. And then, of course, he takes aim at the Reformation.
Reformation, right. Big changes in the church back then.
Huge. She calls it a bad leaven that got introduced into society,
Okay.
leading to what he calls intellectual toxins, like Gallicanism, Jansenism, and philosophism.
Whoa, okay, hold on. For those of us who might need a refresher, can you break those down a bit? What are those things?
Sure. So, like, Gallicanism, that's the idea that the French church, it should be more independent from the Pope.
Okay.
So basically, a challenge to papal authority.
Gotcha.
Then you've got Jansenism, which was this theological movement, really emphasized predestination and human sinfulness.
Okay. And philosophism, what was that one?
So philosophism, in Delassus's view, this is the over-reliance on human reason, right? And that, in his view, leads to a rejection of faith and traditional authority.
I see. So they're all kind of like different ways of challenging church authority.
Exactly. And so in Delassus's mind, the Reformation, it's not just, theological disagreements.
Right.
It's a direct attack on the foundations of Christian civilization, like as he understood it.
So he's seeing it as like this really fundamental shift, not just like a debate about theology.
Precisely. And then, moving through history, we come to the French Revolution.
The French Revolution, always a turning point.
Oh, absolutely. And Delassus sees it as this violent, bloody culmination of all these anti-Christian trends.
Okay, so he's tying it all together.
Yeah, he argues that the revolution, it cemented a naturalistic social order. It further eroded the church's power, its influence.
I see. So the Renaissance plants the seeds, the Reformation spreads those seeds, and then the French Revolution is like, what? The harvest.
A very bloody harvest, you could say.
Right. Okay, so we've got these big movements, right? The Renaissance, the Reformation, and the French Revolution all playing a part in this supposed grand conspiracy.
Right.
But who's actually behind it? Like, who's pulling the strings? Who's he saying is the mastermind?
Well, this is where things get, well, a little shadowy.
Oh, intrigue.
Right. We're talking about Freemasonry.
Ah, the Freemasons.
Delassus, he devotes a huge chunk of his book to this organization.
Interesting.
Paints them as this powerful, secretive force that's working to undermine Christianity.
Okay, so not just a bunch of guys hanging out in lodges, right?
Oh, not at all. He describes this deeply hierarchical structure. At the top, you've got this shadowy Supreme Council.
A Supreme Council.
Yeah, and then there's something even more mysterious called the High Vendita.
Whoa, the High Vendita. What is that?
That's what he calls them. He claims they're working behind the scenes, like orchestrating global events.
Oh, wow. So like puppet masters.
Basically. He even cites, specific examples from Masonic writings and internal documents. He claims those reveal their true intentions.
He's like, I've got the receipt.
Exactly. And here's where it gets even more conspiratorial.
More.
Delassus argues that many rank-and-file Freemasons, they're actually totally clueless about the true goals of their organization.
Okay, so they're just like pawns in this bigger game?
That's what he says. They think they're promoting, brotherhood, enlightenment, but according to Delassus, they're unwittingly contributing to the downfall of Christianity.
It's like they joined the wrong book club, thinking it's all intellectual stimulation and good times.
And then it turns out they're plotting to dismantle Western civilization.
Right, exactly. Okay, so we've got the Freemasons, but does he stop there?
Oh, not even close. He's got a whole list of other groups he believes are part of this anti-Christian agenda. And some of these accusations are, well, pretty unsettling.
Let's hear it. Who else is on his hit list?
Well, two groups in particular stand out. He talks a lot about Jews and what he calls modernist or progressive Catholics. Now, it's important to remember, we're just presenting these claims as they appear in the book.
Of course, of course. We're exploring his worldview here.
Exactly. So in Delassus's view, Jews exploit these modern principles like equality and individual liberty.
Okay.
He claims they do this to gain power, undermine Christian society. He cites examples like, their growing influence in finance, media, even government.
This is starting to sound, a little familiar.
Yeah, it's a familiar and very harmful trope.
Right. So what about these modernist Catholics? Who are they and what's their role in all this?
So for Delassus, these modernist or progressive Catholics, they're basically a fifth column within the church.
Okay, like wolves in sheep's clothing.
Exactly. He accuses them of using their positions within the church to, promote ideas that contradict traditional doctrine, basically weakening it from the inside.
So anyone who's embracing new ideas or interpretations of faith is automatically suspicious in his eyes.
That's right.
Wow, he really sees enemies everywhere, doesn't he?
He does. And all these perceived enemies, according to Delassus, they're all working towards the same goal.
Which is?
The construction of a secular temple, literally built on the ruins of Christianity.
A secular temple. Okay, so you're talking about a literal building here.
No, it's more of a metaphorical concept.
And I see.
He envisions this temple as a new world order.
A new world order, huh? Okay, and what characterizes this new world order?
Well, it's characterized by several key features, and, he views all of them as antithetical to Christian principles.
So, like, the opposite of Christianity.
Right. For example, he predicts this emergence of a one-world government, the abolition of individual nations, and, get this, private property, too.
Whoa, so, no more owning your own home or anything?
That's what he says.
Yeah.
And he also predicts the destruction of the traditional family structure.
Wow, no more families.
Not as we know them, no. And of course, at the very center of this New World Order, there would be this universal secular religion meant to replace Christianity entirely.
Wow, so it's like replacing God with ourselves, I guess.
Yeah, and if you believe, like Delassus did, that humanity is inherently flawed, then this new world order, well, it's built on a pretty shaky foundation.
Doomed to collapse. Okay, so it sounds like overall Delassus is pretty pessimistic about the future.
Yeah, very much so. He sees the forces of secularism, modernism, as almost unstoppable, just steadily chipping away at the foundations of Christian civilization. But it's not entirely hopeless, at least not according to Delassus.
Oh, there's a glimmer of hope in all this. Tell me more.
Well, he does cite, prophecies of renewal and the eventual triumph of the church.
Okay.
He also emphasizes the power of prayer and penance, particularly the sacrifices of, those religious communities.
So if enough good people pray hard enough, maybe disaster can be averted.
That's the idea.
So that's Delassus's theory. A grand anti-Christian conspiracy spanning centuries, driven by secret societies, modernists, and whoever else he sees as an enemy of the church. But what do you make of all this? Is there any truth to his claims?
Well, it's definitely a complex and controversial perspective. And in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to delve into some of the specific examples he uses to back up his claims. We'll examine the evidence, see if his theory holds up under scrutiny.
Sounds good. Can't wait.
All right, so picking up where we left off, let's dig a little deeper into some of Delassus's more specific claims.
Okay, that's good.
Especially when it comes to the French Revolution. Remember how we were talking about Delassus seeing a pattern throughout history?
Right, this grand conspiracy.
Exactly. Well, he considers the French Revolution to be like a pivotal moment in all of this. It's not just some political upheaval,
Right, he's seeing it as more than just people getting fed up with the monarchy.
Yeah, he views it as a symptom of this much deeper, more insidious disease that's been eating away at European society for centuries.
Interesting.
He argues that the seeds of the revolution, they were sown way before the storming of the Bastille.
Okay.
And he traces it back to those intellectual toxins that we mentioned earlier.
Right, the Gallicanism, Jansenism, and what was it? Philosophism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those movements, he claims, they weakened the church's authority and paved the way for a secular humanist worldview to take root.
Okay, so these movements are the intellectual termites slowly gnawing away at the foundations of Christian society.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And to support his point, Delassus actually quotes the conservative Catholic thinker Joseph de Maistre.
Okay.
And de Maistre, he wrote, "The present state of Europe is horrifying. That of France in particular is inconceivable. The revolution is undoubtedly standing, and not only is it standing, but it is walking, it is running, it is kicking."
Wow. He doesn't hold back, does he?
Not at all. You can really feel his sense of alarm about the revolution and its aftermath.
Right. But what specific events or aspects of the revolution does Delassus focus on to support his conspiracy theory? What's he pointing to?
Well, one example he highlights is the suppression of religious orders.
Right, those monastic orders, right? They were pretty influential back then.
Oh, absolutely. They played a huge role in education, healthcare, social services, you name it. And Delassus, he sees their removal as a direct attack on the church's influence.
Makes sense.
Like a way to silence a powerful voice for traditional values.
So by dismantling these institutions, the revolutionaries were essentially what? Creating a vacuum that could then be filled by secular institutions and values.
You got it. And Delassus argues that this was precisely the revolutionaries' intention.
Interesting.
He also highlights their efforts to, replace Christian holidays with secular celebration, like renaming Christmas as the Festival of Reason, for example.
The Festival of Reason. Wow, they really wanted to make a clean break, didn't they?
It's a complete cultural overhaul, not just a change in government.
Right. It's like they're trying to reshape the entire calendar, the whole rhythm of life.
Exactly. And Delassus sees this cultural shift as a deliberate strategy,
By the conspirators.
By the conspirators to marginalize Christianity, to establish a new secular order.
Okay. But let's get back to the Freemasons for a second.
Okay, yeah. Sure.
They seem to be the main villains in Delassus's story, right?
Sure.
What role does he assign them in the French Revolution? What are they actually doing?
He portrays them as a key driving force behind the revolution, like they're pulling the strings from the shadows.
Okay, so he's saying they're what? infiltrating revolutionary groups, spreading their ideas, or even like orchestrating events to destabilize the monarchy.
All of the above. He claims they were everywhere, basically. But, it does sound a bit like he's just saying Freemasons did it without actually showing us how.
Right, exactly. Like, where's the evidence? Does he provide any specific examples or evidence to support these claims?
He does offer some, some intriguing, albeit questionable evidence.
Like what?
Well, for instance, he cites the involvement of certain prominent Freemasons in revolutionary circles, like the Marquis de Lafayette, for example.
Lafayette, right, the French aristocrat who loved liberty so much he helped America fight for it. But does simply being a Freemason automatically make someone a revolutionary mastermind?
Well, Delassus seems to think so. He also points to the writings of, some early Freemasons, some of which expressed ideas about, equality, liberty, self-governance, and those ideas, they definitely resonated with revolutionary ideals.
Sure.
So he uses these writings as evidence of a pre-existing anti-Christian agenda within Freemasonry, an agenda that found expression in the French Revolution.
Okay, I see. So he's saying the Freemasons were like planting the seeds of revolution through their writings. But what about their actions? Does he claim they were actually like actively plotting the downfall of the monarchy?
He does. He even claims that Freemasons used their lodges as secret meeting places to plot against the monarchy and spread revolutionary propaganda.
Really?
Yeah, he cites this quote from a Masonic report from 1883 that states, "It was from 1772 to 1789 that Masonry elaborated the great revolution that was to change the face of the world. It was then that Freemasons popularized the ideas they had taken up in their lodges."
Okay, well, that quote certainly sounds incriminating, at least on the surface. But it's important to remember that this report was written, like decades after the French Revolution. It's easy to look back and, and connect the dots in a way that fits a particular narrative, right?
That's a good point. It's crucial to approach his claims with a healthy dose of skepticism. Are you ready to go even deeper into this alleged Masonic conspiracy?
Hit me with it. The more layers to this conspiracy onion, the better.
Okay, so Delassus introduces this concept of the Illuminati.
The Illuminati. Those shadowy figures who supposedly control everything from governments to the music industry, right? Where do they fit into Delassus's narrative?
So he describes the Illuminati as like a secret society within a secret society. Even more radical, even more secretive than the Freemasons.
Okay, so it's like the Freemasons weren't hardcore enough for these guys.
Right.
They needed to take things to a whole new level of secrecy and subversion.
Exactly. Delassus believes the Illuminati infiltrated Masonic lodges and used them to spread their revolutionary ideas. He cites a quote from the historian Louis Blanc, who wrote, "On the eve of the French Revolution, Freemasonry found itself having taken on an immense development. Spread throughout all of Europe, it presented everywhere the image of a society founded on principles contrary to those of civil society."
Civil society? What does he mean by that?
For Delassus, civil society is basically synonymous with Christian society.
I see.
He sees Christianity as the foundation of Western civilization. And any group that challenges those Christian values is attacking, in his view, the very fabric of society itself.
So it's like a clash of civilizations, a battle for the soul of the Western world.
Exactly. And in this battle, Delassus casts the Illuminati as the ultimate villains.
Okay.
They're like the puppet masters behind the scenes, manipulating events to their liking. He claims they were masters of propaganda, infiltration, even psychological warfare, all aimed at bringing down the church.
Hold on. Psychological warfare. What does he mean by that?
He argues that the Illuminati deliberately spread ideas and rumors that were designed to, undermine people's faith.
Okay.
So discord within society. Think of it as like an early 20th century version of, fake news and social media manipulation, but aimed at eroding religious belief.
Wow. So he's drawing some pretty direct parallels between his time and ours, in a way.
In a way, yes.
So we've got this pyramid of conspiracy with the Illuminati at the very top, controlling the Freemasons, who in turn manipulate the French Revolution to achieve their nefarious goals. And at the bottom of it all, crushed under the weight of it all, is the Catholic Church.
That's the picture Delassus paints.
Right.
He portrays the church as the primary obstacle to the Illuminati's ambitions, the one institution standing in the way of their New World Order. He even claims they have this long-term plan to infiltrate the church itself.
Okay.
Corrupt it from within and ultimately destroy it.
So it's not enough to attack it from the outside. They have to plant their agents within the walls.
Yeah.
Like a Trojan horse.
Exactly. But, if the Freemasons are unknowingly serving the Illuminati's agenda, are there other groups that Delassus sees as witting collaborators in this anti-Christian scheme?
That's a good question. Like, who else is in on it, knowingly?
Well, this is where we return to one of his more controversial claims.
Right.
The alleged role of Jews in this anti-Christian movement. Now, it's essential to emphasize again that Delassus's views on this topic reflect those deeply ingrained anti-Semitic prejudices that were unfortunately very prevalent in Europe at the time.
Right, of course. We're not endorsing these views, but it's important to understand them in context.
Exactly. We're just presenting them as they appear in the source material to give a complete picture of his worldview.
Right. So with that caveat in mind, what exactly is Delassus claiming about Jews? What role does he assign them?
He argues that Jews are actively working to undermine Christian society and ultimately achieve world domination.
Right.
He points to, their growing influence in various sectors of society, like finance, media, government,
right,
as evidence of their insidious power. It's a classic example of that, that Jews control everything trope. A conspiracy theory that's been used to justify, persecution and violence against Jews for centuries.
It's disturbing how these harmful stereotypes persist, even in, supposedly intellectual circles. Does he provide any specific evidence to support this claim of a Jewish conspiracy, or is it just more vague accusations based on prejudice?
He does try to provide evidence, but it's often flimsy and relies on misinterpretations of historical events.
Like what?
For example, he points to the involvement of some Jewish individuals in revolutionary movements.
Okay.
But he fails to demonstrate any kind of organized Jewish conspiracy.
Right.
He also cites, historical examples of Jewish persecution, and argues that this is proof of their inherent anti-Christian nature.
So he's basically saying that because Jews have been historically marginalized and persecuted, they must be secretly plotting revenge against their oppressors.
That's essentially his argument.
It's a classic example of blaming the victim.
Right.
A common tactic used to justify prejudice and discrimination. Okay, so we spent a lot of time unpacking the threats as Delassus sees them, but does he offer any solutions to this supposed anti-Christian conspiracy?
He does.
Like, does he give any advice on how to fight back against these perceived enemies?
He does. He proposes some strategies for combating what he sees as these encroaching forces of secularism and modernism.
Okay, like what?
For instance, he emphasizes the importance of Catholic education.
Makes sense.
He argues that it's essential to instill those traditional values in young people, right?
Okay.
To counter the influence of secular ideas. He also stresses the need for for greater unity within the church, calling for a rejection of those modernist tendencies and a return to a more orthodox interpretation of faith.
So back to basics, basically.
Right, and of course he encourages prayer and penance as powerful weapons against the forces of evil.
So a combination of education, traditional values, and spiritual warfare.
Exactly. He sees this as a battle that requires active engagement on multiple fronts. He even advocates for political action, urging Catholics to get involved in the political process, fight for laws and policies that align with Christian values.
So it's not enough to just pray. You have to go out and actually try to change the world.
That's his view, yes.
Interesting. It's interesting to see how he connects these grand historical trends to very specific recommendations for action.
It's a reminder that even the most, abstract intellectual arguments can have very concrete implications in the real world. But before we get too carried away with solutions, we need to address one more key aspect of Delassus's theory.
Okay. Yes.
Is his vision of the future. If this anti-Christian conspiracy succeeds, what does the world actually look like?
Yeah, that's what I want to know. Does he offer any specific predictions about what this new world order might look like in practice?
He does, and well, let's just say it's not a pretty picture.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm ready for some serious doom and gloom. Play it on me. Okay, so last time we left off with a bit of a cliffhanger, right?
I suppose we did.
Delassus's vision of the future, if this anti-Christian conspiracy actually succeeds, what does that world look like?
Well, get ready because it's a bit of a dystopian nightmare, to say the least. He really paints a bleak picture.
All right, I'm ready. Hit me with it. What's the worst case scenario in Delassus's mind?
Okay, so first of all, he predicts the complete abolition of private property. Like, everything's gone.
Everything.
Your house, your car, your possessions, all of it. It all becomes collectively owned, controlled by, the state, or maybe even some sort of global governing body.
So, like, no more owning anything. That's pretty radical.
It is, and it's a common theme in a lot of these conspiracy theories, right? This fear of losing control, losing individuality.
Yeah, I guess it represents like a complete upending of the existing social order.
Exactly, and for someone like Delassus, steeped in tradition, that's deeply unsettling, but it gets even more, intense.
Worse than no private property.
He predicts the destruction of the traditional family structure as we know it.
Wait, so like no more families? What does that even mean?
No more nuclear family units, no more parents raising their own children. It's all done by the state. Children become essentially wards of the government.
Wow. So parents have no role in raising their kids. It's all state controlled.
That's his vision, yeah. And remember, for Delassus, the family was like the bedrock of Christian society. So destroying the family is like destroying the core of that society.
It's like he's envisioning this world without love, without those personal connections. Just a cold bureaucratic society where the individual is completely subservient to the state.
It's it's a pretty chilling picture, isn't it? And to top it all off, at the very center of this new world order, there would be this universal secular religion.
Okay, like what, replacing Christianity?
Yeah, meant to replace Christianity entirely. He doesn't really go into detail about what this new religion would look like, but he suggests it would be based on, reason, humanism, maybe even a kind of deification of humanity itself.
So instead of worshiping God, we're worshiping ourselves.
In a sense, yes, like the ultimate expression of human hubris.
And if you believe, like Delassus did, that, humanity is inherently flawed, then this whole new world order, this temple, it's doomed to fail.
Right. It's built on a foundation of sin, in his view. But it's fascinating how his worldview really shapes his interpretation of history and his predictions for the future, right?
He sees everything through this lens of this cosmic battle between good and evil. And Christianity, of course, represents the good.
Exactly. But let's be honest, a lot of his predictions haven't exactly come to pass, have they?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have, the abolition of private property or the end of the family, not on a global scale, at least.
Right. And while secularism has definitely, grown in many parts of the world, Christianity is hardly on the verge of extinction. So the question is, what do we make of Delassus's The Anti-Christian Conspiracy today? Is it just a relic of a bygone era, a paranoid rant that's best forgotten? Or are there elements of his analysis that still resonate today?
I think that's the question we really want to leave our listeners with today. What do you see as the lasting impact, if any, of Delassus's ideas? Are there echoes of his fears and concerns in the world today? Like, are there parallels between the anxieties he expressed about the early 20th century and the anxieties we face now in the 21st century?
It's it's definitely something to think about. Delassus was writing at a time of, immense change and uncertainty. A lot like our own time, really. The world was being reshaped by technological advancements, globalization, shifting cultural norms, and he saw these changes as a threat to the traditional order, a threat to his deeply held beliefs.
It makes sense. I mean, we all grapple with change, right?
Yeah.
And it's natural to fear what we don't understand or what seems to, threaten our way of life.
Exactly. And Delassus's book, as outlandish as it may seem, it offers us a glimpse into those anxieties. It's a window into a particular mindset at a particular moment in history.
And even though we can, critique his methods and his conclusions, I think understanding his perspective can help us better understand the broader currents of history and how those currents continue to shape the world we live in today.
I agree. It's a good reminder that history is always being, interpreted and reinterpreted, and that even the most seemingly outlandish ideas can offer valuable insights into the human condition.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into Henri Delassus's The Anti-Christian Conspiracy. It's been a wild ride, that's for sure.
It has, full of intrigue, conspiracy theories, and apocalyptic predictions.
But it's also been, I think, a fascinating look into, a particular worldview, a way of seeing the world that, well, maybe a bit outdated in some respects, still offers some food for thought.
I think so too. It's a good reminder to, to always question, to always be critical, but also to try to understand where people are coming from, even if we don't agree with them.
Well said.
Well,
Thanks for joining us on this journey, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of ideas.